Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're tackling a huge slice of Japanese history, almost 700 years of it, all centered on this one figure, the Shogun.
That's right. We're looking at this vast period, roughly 1185 to 1868, where military governments essentially ran Japan. It's a fascinating time.
And our mission, really, is to get under the skin of what the Shogun actually was, because
Right.
that role changed constantly, didn't it? From this all-powerful military leader to sometimes, well, sometimes a puppet.
Exactly. A puppet who, on paper at least, was always serving the emperor. That dynamic is key. The supreme commander, who technically wasn't the supreme authority.
It's that tension, that power versus legitimacy thing that we really want to unpack for you today.
And maybe the best place to start is the name itself.
Yeah.
Shogun is really just the short version. The full title tells you so much more.
Right, it's Seitaishkin. Let's break that down because, wow, the translation is revealing.
Absolutely is. Seitaishkin translates pretty directly to Commander-in-Chief of the Expeditionary Force against the Barbarians.
Against the barbarians. So, say is conquer, I's barbarian. This wasn't a title about ruling a peaceful nation initially.
Not at all. It was a military field commission, purely functional, given to generals who were literally fighting on the frontiers, pushing back against tribes like the Emishi in the north.
And it's funny, that early Western contact sometimes bypassed this title entirely. They called the shogun the tycoon.
Yeah, sometimes. From the Chinese tycoon, great lord. It took a while for Shogun to become the standard term used in, diplomacy and Western history books. It shows how the perception evolved.
And so let's go back to the beginning, the Heian period. That title, Seitaishkin, it was genuinely temporary back then.
Just for specific campaigns, right? Against those Emishi tribes in the north who weren't exactly keen on imperial rule from Kyoto.
Precisely. And that's why figuring out who the very first shogun was is, well, it's a bit murky. The sources don't all agree.
You see names like Tajihin Ogatamori mentioned Shitomono Otomato. Right. But the one usually credited with, let's say, the most significant early success, the one who really subdued those northern tribes around the late 8th, early 9th century, is Sakanue no Tamaramaro.
Okay, so he achieved the mission, but then what happened to the title?
It just lapsed.
Yeah.
Once the campaign was over, the title was put away. It wasn't a permanent political office. He was a successful general, job done, title gone.
So if the title itself didn't grant lasting political power initially, how did this whole idea of military rule even start? It had to bubble up from the warrior class, the samurai, asserting themselves.
Absolutely. And the first really dramatic attempt, way before the formal shogunate, was Taira no Masakato's rebellion. We're talking early 10th century here.
Masakato wasn't just fighting a local dispute, was he? He went big.
He went huge. He rebelled against the central court, took control of the whole Kanto region, basically the area around modern Tokyo, and declared it independent.
And the really audacious part, he declared himself Shino.
Exactly. A direct challenge to the emperor's sacred authority. I mean, it didn't last. The court crushed him pretty quickly, but the psychological impact was massive. It showed that a powerful warrior could aim for the top spot, or at least try to carve out his own kingdom.
Okay, so that set a precedent, even in failure. Fast forward a couple centuries.
And you get another branch of the Taira clan, led by Taira no Kiyomori. But he played it differently. No open rebellion, he mastered the existing system.
How so?
He rose through the ranks of the court aristocracy, which was unheard of for someone born into the warrior class. He actually reached the very highest position. Daijin, Chancellor of the Realm.
So he got to the top without the shogun title.
Didn't need it. He controlled the court from within. He married his daughter to the emperor, put his own grandson on the throne as Emperor Untoku. He essentially created a samurai-run government inside the old aristocratic framework.
That's clever. He established the principle that the warriors, not the nobles, were now calling the shots politically.
And that set the stage for the formal military government, the shogunate, or bakufu.
Right, the bakufu. The name itself is intriguing. Government from the curtain. It sounds almost temporary, makeshift.
Well, that was the original idea, or at least the symbolism. The maku, the curtain, referred to the field commander's tent on a battlefield. It was meant to signify that this was a military administration subordinate to the emperor, possibly temporary.
But here's a crucial point you find in the sources. They didn't actually call it the bakufu for most of its existence, did they? Especially the Tokugawa shogunate.
No, that's a really important nuance. During the Tokugawa period, they called their government kugi, which means something like public authority or official deliberations.
So when did the term bakufu become common?
Much later, Really only in the 1800s, during the Bakumatsu period, the very end of the shogunate. It was actually weaponized by people who wanted to restore the emperor.
Ah, so calling it the Pent government was a way of saying it wasn't legitimate, that it was just an appointed military thing and the real power belonged back with the emperor.
Precisely. It became a political term used to undermine the shogun's authority. History being used in real-time politics.
Okay, let's get to the first official shogunate, the one everyone thinks of, Minamoto no Yoritomo.
Right. After defeating the Taira clan in the Genpei War, Yoritomo was the undisputed military power. He established his base in Kamakura, far from the court in Kyoto, and in 1192, he finally got the emperor to grant him the title Sei Taishikun.
And he wasn't just a general anymore. He built a whole new system of government, didn't he? This is the real start of Japanese feudalism as we know it.
He's the architect. Moving to Kamakura was step one, physically separating power from the imperial court. Step two was creating new administrative roles to extend his control across the country.
These are the Shugo and the G2.
Exactly. The Shugo were regional military governors, kind of like provincial police chiefs and military commanders rolled into one.
Okay.
And the G2 were land stewards or administrators, appointed to manage estates, collect taxes, settle disputes at a local level.
So basically, inserting his own loyal warrior officials directly into the provinces, bypassing the old court-appointed governors.
Precisely. It redirected power, loyalty, and crucially tax revenue away from Kyoto and straight to Kamakura. A fundamental shift.
Brilliant system. But then Yoritomo dies unexpectedly in 1199, and things get messy fast.
Very messy. This is where the idea of the shogun as a puppet really takes hold, almost immediately. Yoritomo's sons were young, inexperienced, or frankly, not up to the job.
Enter the Huji clan.
Yes, the family of Yoritomo's very capable wife, Hojo Masako. Her father, Hojo Tokimasa, saw the power vacuum. He didn't aim for the shogun title himself. Instead, he created a new position, Shikken, regent for the shogun.
So the power behind the throne.
Absolutely. Tokimasa moved quickly. He eliminated rival clans, like the Hiki, who were related to Yoritomo's eldest son. He essentially pushed aside Yoritomo's first successor, Yori, and eventually had him assassinated.
No.
Very. He installed Yoritomo's younger son, Sanetomo, as the third shogun. But Sanetomo was basically controlled by Tokimasa, the Shikken. The principle was set. The Huju regent held the real authority, not the Minamoto shogun.
And this internal power dynamic allowed the shogunate to weather a major challenge from the outside, right? The emperor tried to take power back.
Yes, the Juki War in 1221. Former Emperor Go-Toba thought he saw weakness in Kamakura after Sanetomo's assassination. He declared the Huju regent, Yoshitoki, Tokimasa's son, an outlaw, and tried to rally forces.
How did that go?
It was a disaster for the imperial side. The shogunate forces marched on Kyoto and crushed the emperor's army easily. This was a pivotal moment.
Because it proved the military government was stronger than the imperial court.
Absolutely. It cemented warrior rule. Hujo exiled Go-Toba and two other former emperors. And crucially, they established a permanent shogunate office in Kyoto, the Rokuhara Tandai, specifically to watch over the court and prevent any future uprisings. The emperor was now firmly restricted to ceremony.
But the Huchu weren't done refining the puppet system. They took it even further.
Oh, yes. This is puppet mastery level 2.
Yeah.
By the mid-13th century, the Minamoto line of shoguns had died out anyway. So the Huju faced a choice. Who should be shogun now?
And they made a really interesting choice.
A politically brilliant one. In 1252, the fifth Shikken, Hojo Tokiyori, arranged for an imperial prince, Prince Munetaka, to become the sixth shogun.
Why bring in royalty? Wouldn't that give the imperial family more leverage?
You'd think so, but it did the opposite. An imperial prince shogun had zero personal following among the samurai vassals. He was an outsider, a figurehead brought in from Kyoto. Unlike a potential samurai shogun, he couldn't rally independent support or challenge the Huju. It made the shogun's position purely ceremonial, completely dependent on the region.
So it further neutralized the office of shogun itself.
Precisely. And then Tokiyori added another layer of insulation for the real power. He retired as Shikken, but he didn't give up power. He continued to rule privately, using the title Tokusu.
Tokusu, what does that mean?
It just meant head of the main line of the Huchi clan. It wasn't even an official government position.
Ah, so if there was trouble, a rebellion or assassination attempt, the target would be the figurehead shogun, or maybe the official shikken.
While the Tokushu, the real decision-maker, was operating behind the scenes, without an official title that could be easily attacked or transferred.
That's incredible. Look at the layers. You've got the emperor at the top, theoretically, then the shogun, who's now an imperial prince puppet, then the shikken, the regent, who's also becoming a figurehead for the real power.
Which is the Tokusu, the Huji clan head. And sometimes if the Tokushu was too young or incapacitated, the power actually rested with his chief retainer, the Naikanrei. It's like Russian dolls of political power.
Amazing complexity. That must have made it incredibly stable for a while.
It did for over a century.
Yep.
But even the most intricate system can break. And the breaking point for Kamakura came from an unexpected direction: the Mongols.
The invasions of 1274 and 1281, Japan fought them off, famously with the help of typhoons, the kamikaze, but victory came at a cost.
A huge cost, specifically for the shogunate's relationship with its own warriors, the Gokunin. These samurai fought bravely, incurred debts equipping themselves, expected rewards.
But there were no rewards.
Exactly. Unlike a normal war where you conquer new territory and distribute it, it just defended Japan. There was no new land to give out. The shogunate was financially broke from the defense effort anyway, so the loyal samurai got nothing but debt and resentment.
And that created an opening.
For Emperor Go-Daigo, he saw the widespread dissatisfaction among the warrior class and decided it was time for another imperial restoration attempt. This time, fueled by samurai anger, it worked. The Huju were overthrown, Kamakura was sacked and burned in 1333. End of an era.
So the Fuji are gone. Emperor Go-Daigo is back in charge. But his restoration, the Kenmu restoration, it didn't last long, did it?
Barely 3 years, 1333 to 1336. And it failed spectacularly.
Why? He got what he wanted, direct imperial rule.
Yeah, but he completely misread the situation. He tried to run a feudal, warrior-dominated country using the old, outdated aristocratic systems from centuries before. Plus, he made the crucial mistake of rewarding the court nobles who'd done nothing instead of the samurai warriors who'd actually overthrown the Huge for him.
So the warriors felt betrayed. Again.
Big time.
Again.
And the whole administration just ground to a halt. It was chaotic. And the key samurai leader who felt most slighted was Ashikaga Takauji.
The guy who had initially helped Go-Daigo defeat the Fuji.
The very same. Takauji, who was actually a descendant of the Minamoto clan, saw his chance. He turned on Go-Daigo, drove him out of Kyoto, installed a different member of the imperial family as a rival emperor, and in 1338 had himself appointed Seiyutai Shogun.
And that's the start of the Ashikaga shogunate, based back in Kyoto this time, right? In the Muramachi district.
Yes, which was a significant difference from Kamakura. Being right next to the imperial court in Kyoto ultimately proved to be a source of weakness, not strength, for the Ashikaga.
Yeah.
Well, for starters, the era began with immediate division. Go-Daigo didn't just disappear. He fled south to Yoshino and set up a rival imperial court.
Ah, so you had two emperors.
For almost 60 years.
Yeah.
This was the Nanboku-Chu period, the period of the southern and northern courts. One emperor in Kyoto, back to the Ashikaga, and Go-Daigo's line claiming legitimacy from the south. It tore the country apart with constant fighting.
60 years. That's a long time. Who eventually resolved it?
The third Ashikaga shogun, Yoshimitsu, finally managed to reunify the courts in 1392. He was probably the most powerful of the Ashikaga shoguns. But even under him, the fundamental problem of the Ashikaga era was already apparent: decentralization.
They didn't control the country as tightly as the Huja had.
Not even close. Instead of keeping power centralized, the Ashikaga shoguns tended to empower their regional governors, the Chugo. They gave them more and more authority, military power, judicial power, even the power to levy their own taxes within their provinces.
That sounds like a mistake. You're basically letting your regional deputies become independent rulers.
That's exactly what happened. These empowered Shugo evolved into Shugo daimyo, regional feudal lords who commanded their own armies, funded by their own tax revenues. The shogun in Kyoto became increasingly reliant on their goodwill.
So, while the Ashikaga shoguns in Kyoto were becoming famous patrons of the arts, Zen Buddhism, no theater, the Golden Pavilion built by Yoshimitsu, their actual political and military grip was weakening.
Precisely. Culturally brilliant, politically fragile, and this slow diffusion of power eventually exploded into outright civil war.
The Sun War.
The Sina War, starting in 1467. It began as a succession dispute within the Ashikaga family itself, but it quickly spiraled into a massive nationwide conflict between the great Shugo daimyo clans fighting for dominance.
And it was fought right in the capital, wasn't it?
Right in Kyoto. For over a decade, the city was systematically destroyed, burned to the ground multiple times. It was devastating.
And the result for the shogunate?
Total collapse of authority. The Shudenin War shattered any remaining power the Ashikaga shogun held. It marked the definitive start of the Sengoku Jidai, the Age of Warring States.
Where the daimyo basically became independent kings in their own territories.
Exactly. The Shugo daimyo gave way to the Sengoku daimyo, who ruled, fought, made alliances, and ignored the shogun entirely. The shogun became irrelevant, a figurehead clinging to a title in the ruins of Kyoto.
Which makes the story of the 13th shogun, Ashikaga Yoshiteru, so poignant.
It really is. Yoshiteru became shogun in a time when the office had no real power, no money, no army to speak of. But he himself was apparently a skilled warrior, a renowned swordsman trained by the famous Sukahara Bokuden.
A warrior trapped in a powerless position.
Completely. And his end was tragic, but somehow fitting for the era. In 1565, forces loyal to the Miyoshi clan, who were maneuvering for power, attacked his residence.
Did he try to escape?
No. The accounts say he prepared for battle. He reportedly laid out his collection of famous swords on the floor around him. He fought personally, bravely, apparently cutting down several attackers before being overwhelmed and killed. The sword shogun dying in a hopeless last stand.
A symbol of the end, really.
Absolutely. The Ashikaga shogunate limped on for a few more years on paper, but it was effectively over. It officially ended in 1573 when Oda Nobunaga, one of the rising Sengoku daimyo, simply kicked the last Ashikaga shogun Yoshiaki out of Kyoto. No battle needed, just dismissed. #Takeovi. Unification and the apex of military rule. Tokugawa.
So the Ashikaga are out. The country is in chaos, the Sengoku period. And then come the three figures who put Japan back together: Oda Nobunaga, Toyotomi Hideyoshi, and Tokugawa Ieyasu.
The great unifiers. And their careers show how the nature of power had shifted again. The shogun title itself wasn't the ultimate prize anymore. Controlling the military and the land was.
Look at Nobunaga. He effectively ended the Ashikaga shogunate, conquered most of central Japan using innovative tactics, especially firearms. But he never took the title Seihai Toshikun, did he?
No. Sources suggest he was offered it, or could have easily taken it, but he seemed uninterested. He preferred high-ranking titles from the old imperial court aristocracy instead.
Like Udejin, the minister of the right, or that military-sounding one, Yukane no Taishu.
Exactly. Major captain of the Right Division of Inner Palace Guards. These titles gave him immense prestige and legitimacy, connecting him to the emperor, but without the baggage and the perceived weakness of the recent Ashikaga shoguns. He was forging his own path to power.
And then his successor, Hideyoshi, completed the unification, rose from literally peasant origins to become the most powerful man in Japan. He took the highest court titles, Kampaku, imperial regent, even Daiji Daijin, chancellor. But still, no shogun title. Why not?
This is a key point. Despite having absolute power, the consensus among historians is that his humble birth was the sticking point. The shogun title, by tradition, was supposed to go to someone descended from the Minamoto clan, or at least somewhat of high samurai or noble birth.
Even though the Shijo had put imperial princes in the role?
Right, the rule wasn't totally rigid, but apparently installing a former peasant, however powerful, was a step too far for tradition. It shows that even at the height of military power, these old legitimacies still mattered, at least symbolically.
Fascinating. So that leaves Tokugawa Ieyasu. He wins the decisive battle of Sekigahara in 1600, consolidates power.
And he takes the title. In 1603, Tokugawa Ieyasu becomes shogun, establishing the third and final shogunate, the Tokugawa or Edo shogunate, and he learned from all the mistakes of the past.
First big move, setting up his capital in Edo, modern Tokyo, far from Kyoto and the imperial court's influence like Yoritomo did with Kamakura.
Crucial move. Then he systematically dealt with potential rivals. The biggest threat was Hideyoshi's young son, Hideyori, and his supporters based in Osaka Castle. Ieyasu eliminated them decisively in the Siege of Osaka campaigns in 1614-1615.
Okay, rivals removed. But how did he ensure long-term stability and control over all those powerful daimyo across the country? That's what tripped up the Ashikaga.
Ieyasu's system for controlling the daimyo was genius, really. It revolved around classifying them.
This is the Fudai and Tazama distinction.
Exactly. Fudai daimyo were the inner lords, those families who'd been loyal to Ieyasu before the Battle of Sekigahara. They were rewarded with lands close to Edo, strategically important locations, and positions within the shogunate bureaucracy. They were the trusted core.
And the Dozama.
The outer lords. These were the powerful clans who had submitted to Ieyasu only after Sekigahara or had even fought against him. They were generally given large domains, but crucially, these domains were far away from Edo, often on the periphery of Japan. Think Satsuma and Chushu in the southwest.
So keep your potential enemies far away, isolated from the center of power and excluded from the government.
Precisely. They were also watched closely, subject to rules requiring them to spend alternate years in Edo, the Sankenkutai system, which drained their finances and leave their families as hostages. It was a system designed to prevent any regional power base from becoming strong enough to challenge the Tokugawa.
Very thorough. And Ieyasu also followed that Hujo playbook of ruling from behind the scenes, didn't he?
He did. He pulled a Nogosho. He retired as shogun in favor of his son, Hidetada, after only 2 years, in 1605. But he continued to wield the real power as the retired or cloistered shogun, the Shosho, until his death over a decade later.
Why do that? Why not just stay shogun?
It ensured a smooth succession, trained his heir under his supervision, and protected the core power. If something went wrong, the official shogun took the heat, while the experienced Shosho remained secure. It became a standard Tokugawa practice.
Okay, so the daimyo are controlled, succession is managed. What about the emperor? How did they neutralize that potential source of legitimacy?
With legislation. In 1615, the shogunate issued the Kinshu Narabiniku Shohado laws for the imperial court and nobility.
And what did these laws say?
In essence, they confined the emperor and the court aristocracy strictly to scholarly pursuits, poetry, and performing ancient ceremonial rituals. All political power, military authority, foreign relations, appointments, everything that mattered for ruling the country was explicitly the domain of the shogun. The emperor remained the divine figurehead, the ultimate source of legitimacy, but completely stripped of political function.
Locked in a gilded cage.
Pretty much. The Tokugawa were also obsessed with ensuring their own bloodline continued.
This is where the collateral houses come in, the Gasanka and Gasankyu.
Exactly. The Gasaki were 3 main branch families, Owari, Kishu, Mido, established by Iyasu's younger sons. Later, the Gasanki, Tayasu, Hitotsubashi, Shimizu were added. If the main shogunal line failed to produce an heir, a successor would be chosen from one of these collateral branches. It guaranteed the shogunate stayed within the Tokugawa clan.
Very systematic. And speaking of heirs, we have to mention the shoku. The shogun's great interior, or harem, often portrayed very dramatically.
And it was dramatic, sometimes housing hundreds, even close to 1,000 women, wives, concubines, attendants, officials. But the sources emphasize it wasn't just about pleasure or producing heirs. It was a major political center in its own right.
Political how?
It was run with strict hierarchies and complex rules. Marriages between the shogun and daughters of powerful daimyo were arranged here, sealing alliances. But it also acted as an information hub and a control mechanism. Wives and ladies-in-waiting from daimyo families were essentially hostages, and their activities and the information they received could be monitored. It influenced succession politics within the castle and helped manage relationships with the feudal lords.
Fascinating, a hidden political world. Now, within this long Tokugawa piece, you get some very different kinds of shoguns, like Tokugawa Tsunayoshi, the 5th shogun, famous for his animal protection laws.
Infamous, some might say. His Shuriya Waremi no Rei edicts on compassion for living things placed extreme restrictions on harming animals, especially dogs. People were punished severely, even executed for cruelty to animals. Historically, it was often seen as bizarre tyranny.
But there's a more recent interpretation.
Yeah, modern historians often see it as something more complex. Perhaps a deeply Buddhist-influenced attempt to fundamentally change the ethics of society, to move away from the brutality of the recent Civil War era and instill compassion, order, and civic virtue, albeit through very harsh enforcement. Social engineering on a grand scale.
And then you have someone like the 8th shogun, Yoshimune, who focused on practical reforms.
Right. Yoshimune faced financial difficulties and implemented the Kishu reforms. These were much more pragmatic, trying to stabilize rice prices, encouraging new cash crops, cutting shogunate expenses.
And didn't he introduce something for public feedback?
He did. The Maya Subako, a suggestion box placed outside Edo Castle where anyone, commoner or samurai, could submit petitions or ideas directly to the shogun. Apparently some useful civic improvements like better firefighting systems came out of it. It showed the shogunate could still adapt and respond, at least sometimes. #V.
But even this incredibly stable Tokugawa system eventually started to crack. The final decades, the Bakumatsu era from the 1850s onwards, were full of turmoil. What went wrong?
It was a combination of internal rot and external shock. Internally, you had renewed factionalism, particularly fierce disputes over who should succeed childless shoguns. The Naki faction versus the Hitotsubashi faction, drawing in powerful daimyo. The finances were strained again, too.
So the system was weakening from within, and then came the shock from the outside.
Commodore Matthew Perry and the American black ships arriving in Edo Bay in 1853, demanding Japan open up to trade. This was the catalyst.
Why was it so destabilizing?
Because the shogunate, weakened by internal division, felt it had no choice but to agree. Signing the treaties with the U.S. and then other Western powers in 1854 and 1858 treaties that were clearly unequal and unfavorable to Japan shattered the shogun's prestige.
How so?
For 250 years, the Tokugawa had justified their rule, partly on their ability to keep foreigners out and maintain peace. Now they looked weak, unable to defend the nation. This gave ammunition to anti-shogunate forces.
And those forces rallied around a powerful slogan, Sunojure.
Revere the emperor, expel the barbarians. It was brilliant political messaging. It took the emperor, who'd have been powerless for centuries, and made him the symbol of national unity and resistance. And it painted the shogun as a failure, someone who had betrayed Japan by yielding to foreigners.
So the emperor becomes a political weapon against the shogun.
Exactly. And the movement gained momentum, particularly in those powerful Tozama domains that Ieyasu had exiled to the periphery centuries earlier, especially Choshu and Satsuma.
The outer lords, they were so resentful.
They have long memories and ambitions. And crucially, these two domains, historically rivals, managed to form an alliance, the Setchushi Alliance.
That was a big deal, wasn't it? Brokered by figures like Sakamoto Arima.
A huge deal. United, their military forces were formidable. They proved it by defeating the shogunate's forces in the Second Choshu expedition in 1866. It showed the shogun could no longer enforce his will, even within Japan. The game was up.
And the last shogun, Tokugawa Yoshinobu, he saw the writing on the wall.
He did. In 1867, facing overwhelming pressure from the Such alliance and other domains, Yoshinobu made a calculated move. He formally returned governing authority, Taisei Hukan, to the young Emperor Meiji. He hoped this would preserve a role for the Tokugawa clan in a new government structure.
But it didn't quite work out that way.
No. The radical elements in the Sacha alliance wanted the Tokugawa gone completely. This led to the Boshin War in 1868-69, where imperial forces defeated the remaining shogunate loyalists. The Meiji Restoration was complete. 700 years of shogunate rule was over.
And the samurai class itself soon followed. The Satsuma Rebellion in 1877, led by Saigo Takamori, was the last gasp of the traditional warrior way against the new conscript army of the modernizing state.
A truly definitive end to that era.
There's also that fascinating little story about the lost sword, the Hanju Masamune.
Ah, yes. A legendary sword, considered perhaps the finest ever made, passed down through the Tokugawa shoguns, a symbol of their legitimacy and power.
And what happened to it?
After World War II, during the American occupation, all swords were ordered to be surrendered. The Tokugawa family handed the Hanju Masamune over to a local police station in late 1945, as required, and it just disappeared, vanished without a trace.
Wow, the ultimate symbol of shogunal power, just gone. A perfect metaphor, really.
It really is.
So the shogunate is gone, the samurai are gone, but does any legacy remain? You mentioned the idea of ruling from behind the curtain.
It's incredibly persistent, that idea. In modern Japanese politics, you still hear the term Yami Shogun, shadow shogun.
What does that refer to?
It's used, often critically, to describe a powerful retired politician, maybe a former prime minister or faction leader, who no longer holds official office but is still seen as pulling the strings behind the scenes, influencing policy, choosing successors.
Just like the Hushotokusu or the Tokugawa Gosho.
Exactly. Figures like Kakugi Tanaka in the 70s and 80s, or more recently Ichiro Ozawa, have been labeled Yami Shogun. It suggests this ancient pattern of indirect rule of hidden power centers hasn't entirely disappeared from the political culture. It's perhaps the shogun's most subtle yet enduring legacy. #outro.
So looking back over this incredible 700-year span, the shogun was this constant paradox, wasn't he? The de facto ruler, holding all the real military and administrative power.
But always technically subordinate to the emperor, maintaining that fiction of legitimacy derived from the imperial throne, even when the emperor himself was completely powerless.
And the real genius, or maybe the complexity, often lay in those layers beneath the shogun, the regents, the clan heads, the retired shoguns, the puppet masters, pulling the strings of the supposed supreme commander.
It's a story of constantly shifting power, hidden behind layers of titles and ceremony. Yet, through all of it, through 3 major shogunal dynasties, something remarkable didn't happen. No shogun ever successfully tried to eliminate the imperial family and take the throne himself. They could sideline the emperor, control him, legislate around him, but they never replaced him.
Which leaves us with a really profound final thought for you, the listener. Why? Why, when these military rulers held absolute physical control over Japan for centuries, did they never take that final step? What stopped Yoritomo or the Huge or Ieyasu from simply declaring themselves emperor?
It seems the answer wasn't about swords or soldiers or castles. It was about something intangible, the sacred mythological authority of the emperor. The belief, deeply embedded that the emperor was the Tenno, the heavenly sovereign, descended directly from the sun goddess Amaterasu.
That religious legitimacy proved to be the one power the shoguns couldn't conquer.
Apparently so. It was the ultimate backstop, the reason the imperial line, despite centuries of political irrelevance, remains unbroken to this day. A fascinating testament to the enduring power of belief over brute force.